listeners to the latest edition of our In the Hot Seat panel discussion. This is content that ScanSource is bringing to you, our partners, as part of the Discover Opportunity Initiative. And I'm pleased today to be joined by three industry experts that are going to help you, our mutual customers, discover opportunities in the education space. So let me start with the round of introductions here and let our panelists introduce themselves. So Ben, let's start with you.
Hello, my name is Ben McGregor. I'm the Western Regional Director for Exact, and I've been in the security and surveillance field for, over 20 years now. So pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Yep, I'm glad to have you. Staying in a similar field, we'll go to Glenn next.
My name is Glenn Adair. I'm with Panasonic iPro Sensing Solutions, and I'm a product manager.
Thank you, Glenn. And Vince, you'll round us out.
Good morning. My name is Vince Martinez, and I'm the Executive Government Advisor for Advisa, for particularly the state, local government, and education team.
Appreciate the time for all three of you to join us today on this panel. As I said in the opener, this is a series of panels that we're covering all under the Discover Opportunities vehicle, and this series is focused on education. We've had one on higher education institutions. We've talked about distance learning. We're talking about the future of hybrid learning. Today, we're going to focus on safeguarding our students and staff. So this is really a kind of an in-person conversation, but it's not limited to in-person learning, obviously. But we'll start, Ben, with you. And just kind of let's get into the topic and start talking about physically safeguarding students and staff now that they're starting to return to campus. And this is relevant in the K through 12 space. It's relevant in higher education space, obviously, but lots of doors opening right now, and some good opportunities for our partners to use technology to solve the concerns around safeguarding students and staff. So what are you seeing in your day job where technology is being used to solve those challenges?
And I think doors open is a good analogy. I mean, especially with schools where you have people coming in and doors are literally being opened and closed. A lot of foot traffic, getting back to normal. I think schools really want situational awareness, and what are those tools that help them understand, the new patterns or things going back to normal. So whether that's using video surveillance to understand what's going on in parking lots or hallways, using new technologies that we've seen come out, which are pretty exciting, everything from, mask detection, which was really just an adjustment off of facial recognition technology that most of the manufacturers were able to make a tweak, to thermal sensing cameras, trying to have an initial way to screen people to see if they have a temperature so that schools can make decisions on doing a secondary screening. Again, this is technology that really wasn't being utilized specifically in the K through 12 or higher education market, maybe more in specialized government stuff, that the industry was able to really turn around quickly and bring solutions that may make sense or may not, but working with the schools to understand their unique challenges, as a father, I think one of the biggest challenges was keeping students in school. Right. So I think whatever tools they could have to understand, is this person, healthy or sick, I think, and following the rules that were set on by that school, that state, that county. The schools were in a delicate position of having to follow their own rules and guidelines that were imposed upon them. So, I think they were given a whole list of things that they had to try to achieve. And we were just there saying, well, what can we do? Does this help? Does this help?
Schools are in the business of education. They're not in the business of IT, right? So that's one of the other challenges is we've got fairly complex technology being introduced to them. And so it comes with a management and a training and a deployment, like all those just kind of normal challenges. Vince, I'm going to go right off script immediately and put you on the spot. Ben made a reference to government entities, and we've had a past panelist talking about all the grant money that's out there. It's available to education and others to deploy technology in this time. But I'd love to hear if you've got some thoughts on what you bring from your day job that deal with the regulations and assistance and all that other kind of government run programs that education providers can leverage.
Yeah, so I mean, certainly we've seen, through the pandemic, I think there was the initial $1.7 trillion that came down to school districts and municipalities and states. And now there's the America Recovery Act, and that's another, also 1.9 trillion. So you got $3.6 trillion funneling down to us. We probably haven't spent the first, 1.7, right?
Yeah.
And so I think folks are just struggling in general and where they're going to make those investments. And there's certainly a need. And I think what the concern is just that once this funding is expended, how are we going to sustain those types of programs going forward? So, in recent studies around higher ed and also within K through 12, funding is one of the number one priorities. And I think we're all going to have to come together. And by all, I think it's the community, it's the business, it's the political leaderships that are going to have to figure out how we're going to, be able to become more student centric in terms of providing services.
Yep. I appreciate you letting me go off script and handling it so eloquently. That's a perfect call out. I'm a services guy. I almost never introduce myself in these panels. I don't know why, but I run the services organization at ScanSource. And so you just mentioned, and Ben did too, just the idea of needing to have ongoing maintenance, ongoing services of this technology once it's deployed. It's a great opportunity for our customers to provide some managed services. So thank you for that. Glenn, I'm coming back on script, coming to you. So doors are opening literally and figuratively for campuses. And now we have schools with hybrid learners, in-person learners, distance learners. They're educating a much larger population than they may have access into the past. So are you seeing technology solutions being deployed in campuses to keep from overcrowding?
Yeah, there's definitely interest, and since this has all popped us on us unexpectedly, obviously there's no purpose-built solution specifically designed for that. So we're actually looking to see what existing technologies and analytics and devices can be redeployed or repurposed that would be suitable. We've always had occupancy detection. We primarily use it in the retail space to evaluate the interest in and the flow of traffic through retail spaces, and we're looking at that now to serve as our occupancy detection for these spaces as they're opening up to make sure there's compliance there. As Ben already mentioned, we certainly repurposed our facial recognition to recognize whether or not someone was wearing a mask, and thermal cameras, which were never meant as temperature screening of people, are now being redeployed for that purpose as well. So we're seeing a repurposing of the technology. But what's interesting though is as we reopening, we see the interest in that, but we also see the return to the fundamentals that actually there was a slight shift in the interest as the spaces became unoccupied or underoccupied. There was more emphasis on remote management, more emphasis on, being able to monitor spaces that normally were occupied by people to make sure that, maybe workers who are working, with not as many people there, that they were being monitored and protected, and, not only from physical threats, but injuries and things like that. So it's been an evolution, and that's the thing is repurposing the technology, and then certainly as we deploy these, which we hope are temporary measures, there's always the thought that when this crisis is over, how else can we use this to better serve the facility and meet their educational objectives?
I think you almost said investment protection a couple of times, but it's the key, especially in this space where there isn't always budget dollars to spend on technology, right? I mean, Vince just talked about $3+ trillion that are available right now, but then also said, but it's a limited time offer, not available in all states. See store for details. So we're gonna run out of budget dollars at some point. I know Ben and Glenn, in your spaces specifically, we went through this transition of analog to IP. Where we could, we reused infrastructure to deploy the new technology on old infrastructure. This is just the next iteration of it, as far as I'm concerned, Glenn. It's a really interesting time, and I'm glad you brought up the thermal cameras were never meant to be temperature detection, but that's a perfect and very, very timely example of what we saw this industry go through in the last year. All right, so Vince, I'll come to you for this next question, and it's kind of along the same lines. We've been talking about the larger number of students coming into education institutions and the systems that are responsible for communicating with all of these students, and also the fact that they change every couple of years. So this isn't a steady user group. So all these systems for communication and safety are all being taxed. Any advice for our partners on where we can help those institutions with all of this communications and safety?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to build on what Glenn, spoke about, is just there's been some investments made. There's also this notion of competition, right? And so even in K through 12, you have school choice, and then certainly students have the opportunity to decide between any higher ed institution that they want to. EDUCAUSE did like a recent study, and it was on student success technologies, right? And they also did a top 10 list. So the top 3 are all about funding, security, and number 4, 5, and 6 are really interested because they're about, number 4 is digital integrations, and then there's this number 5 is student-centric education, and also student retention and completion is number 6. And so I think what we find out going into any of these institutions, whether they're K through 12 or higher ed, is that they're in a multi-cloud environment, right? They've got CRM platforms, they've got learning management platforms, they've got ERP platforms, and they also made a huge investment in workforce and student collaboration platforms. And I think where the challenge is going to be, and what the study also shows, is that the schools are looking for value that can be brought into this multi-cloud infrastructure in this investment. And it's really, they're starting to talk about these composable applications that you can layer and leverage all these technologies with APIs to be able to, provide a more effective communication with all the stakeholders in education, whether that be the student, whether that be the faculty, whether that be the parents in the K through 12, whether it be, some school districts have police departments and some higher ed have it. Just overall looking on how they can leverage those types of platforms for a better learning experience.
Yeah, well, so you did a great job of teeing up the last 2 questions I wanted to ask as an all play here for all 3 of you. You guys feel free to chime in where you want to, but let's start with the second of the 2 that I gave you guys. But are students considering security as one of the decision points in choosing where they go to get their education?
Well, I'll start. I mean, I certainly, and as a parent, of college age students, it's not so much safety. Safety is always in the back of our minds, but it really is about how comfortable they feel in the educational environment. The primary mission of these institutions, whether it's K to 12 or higher ed, is education. In order for that to be successful, they have to be comfortable. And there's more than just safety to being comfortable. And we recognize that. We recognize that our mission as safety and security specialists is not to be the dominant force of the facility, but to provide or just enhance and make the environment safe. So it's certainly on everybody's mind. If it's not on the student's mind, it's certainly on the parents or other stakeholders' mind. It's certainly on the administrator's mind. And it's our job is just to make sure that the environment is conducive to education by providing a safe environment free of distractions.
Any other thoughts, Ben or Vince?
Well, I'll just jump on as well as someone that does have college age students as well. That, yeah, I think Glenn is exactly right. It's the overall environment, and that tone is really set from the top down with the school administrators or the school president, with their commitment to whether it's technology, security, safety. When that tone is set, you definitely feel it when you tour a campus, for instance, and you see, the blue, I forget what they're called, code blue emergency calling stations, or just a presence of school resource officers, or as you mentioned, some schools have their own police force. They're all a little different, but you get that sense and that investment. And I think it's a intangible that you kind of just sense when you're there, and you get an overall feeling that, yeah, this place is making an investment in what may not be actual education tools or whatnot, but it's things that support that. And like Glenn said, that you're comfortable in that environment. I think you can't overstate that.
Yep. And maybe this is a similar question in different words, but I think you just mentioned it, Ben. But where do you guys see the decision being made on safety and security investments? Is that from the dean's office, from the president's office? Is it student groups? Is it their IT organization? I mean, who's ultimately stroking the check on making purchases?
Well, I mean, everyone can certainly chime in. It's across the board. I think obviously we've seen a huge shift with K through 12. I'll start there. A shift from facilities to IT, and within that, going back to something you said earlier, what you're also seeing in that case is some of these IT centric tools now being used, because it's out of their tool belt that they may have used for IT with businesses. As an example, health monitoring of servers typically has not been a facilities type tool. It's been an IT type tool for surveillance, but you're seeing that being used now that over the summer or during the pandemic, where campuses were empty, where maybe even the facilities or maintenance people were not on site, these buildings still had to be secure and kept up to date with these systems. So being able to remotely go in and manage these or check on these systems. So from K through 12, we certainly see that. With higher education, it's typically more with the executive staff, but certainly everyone plays a role. So facilities, student groups, I've seen this as well, that have an opinion or a real world example or an experience that will help guide that decision. But ultimately it tends to go with administration or with the executives with higher ed. But again, even with K through 12, a lot of times it's a public bond that's put out and agreed upon by the public that, yeah, we're going to make this investment into security for this school district.
Yeah.
Yeah, and certainly there's a lot of stakeholders who have an input into what that policy looks like. So the administration, the executive, the parents, the students, but then ultimately they're going to rely on their special expertise. Now they could reside with the IT department. It could reside with a specialized security department on facilities. So there's really two levels. There's the stakeholders, which can include parents and students and administrators. They're going to drive the policy. They're going to tell you what they want, but they're going to look to special expertise, either internally or externally with their integrators and dealers or outside consultants. But and so there's two aspects to it: is what do we want, and what does it take to get there? And those two sides have to work together.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, Kyle. I think student safety is just a broad concern, right? And therefore it requires a collaborative approach. And what we're seeing is committees that are being set up, and it doesn't matter if it's K through 12 or higher ed, that are looking at, Ray Baum's Act, which is all about dispatchable location, Kerry's Law, that are looking at make sure you can just dial 911 directly. I think state of Texas has an active shooter notification legislation that just passed the Senate unanimously over there. It's a different environment. And so, being able to get all those folks involved, I believe in small group dynamics. So keep that population small so that you can make a decision at the right time.
All right. Well, thank you. I'll close us out. I'll try to summarize some of the opportunities you guys helped us discover today. So there's clearly, as Glenn talked about, there's a investment protection opportunity here where we as trusted advisors in the technology space can help our partners redeploy technology or leverage their existing infrastructures to deploy new technology. We talked about there's money out there that's available to help. I'm glad you steered me towards comfort and safety instead of necessarily using the word security, because I definitely undervalued the comfort part of what we're all trying to accomplish here, and that's just making both the students and the staff feel comfortable, feel safe in the environment, not just tactily providing security. So there's this panel, as I've said, and others in this series, partners, as you are talking to your customers in this space. If you need help with additional discovering opportunities, please contact your ScanSource contact. Clearly, you can contact your supplier contacts. These three gentlemen represented as part of that. And we have a lot more resources on our website at www.scansource.com/education program. So with that, I will thank again our panelists, Ben, Glenn, and Vince. Thank you guys for your time today.